guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Kaylee June and I'm a beauty and fashion photographer based in Australia. And today I'm going to be doing this tutorial on how I edited this photograph. Now it's going to be across Capture One and Photoshop like my last tutorial was. I know I'm doing a second one in 2 weeks basically. So I know that not all of you guys are interested in these kinds of videos, but I did have some pretty good feedback from the last couple that I have done using this kind of method and doing a start to finish retouch. So I wanted to do another one today. I'm hoping to maybe get a little bit more in terms of product photography related content out soon because I am actually in lockdown. So I don't know when I'm going to be out of lockdown at this point. It is not really looking good for where I am, and we're just going to have to deal with it as it comes. So I'm really hoping to get into a bit more of that, but today we are going to proceed with doing a start to finish retouch on this particular image. Now this image was taken in natural light in my studio in Sydney, so we are going to go through a slightly different process of how I edited the image last week that I was showing you guys, which was more of an editorial image. This is also an editorial image for that matter, but this being taken in natural light, I do tend to edit these kinds of images a little bit differently, and I tend to have a very minimalistic approach with how I edit skin and how I actually color grade the images too. So without further rambling, we're going to jump straight into the tutorial now, and I'm going to show you guys in Capture One how I color graded this image and then move over to Photoshop and show you guys how I did the skin retouching. So it's going to be just a little bit of an edit with me video today. Okay, so now we're back to the original image now, and I actually did crop this image. So I'm actually going to do that first, and I'm just going to crop by using this tool up here, the crop tool. I'm actually just going to hold down Shift on the keyboard as I move the borders in, and we're just going to kind of crop. The reason I cropped it was because I didn't really like this part here. It was a little bit distracting with the hair kind of like puffing up, and I just didn't want that bit in there. So I'm going to just move it over to center it a little bit more and just crop in about there. All right, so now it's kind of zoomed in a little bit more on the face. So now that we've cropped the image, I'm going to go over to the exposure tab just here. So we're going to just make a couple of adjustments here. Now, I did actually move the contrast up a little bit. And the reason that I did this is because we're going to alter the curves adjustment tab in just a second, and we're actually going to bring down the highlights as well. So in bringing down the highlights, what it actually does for some natural light images is it kind of gives it a bit more of a muted feel. And that's what I really wanted for this image. I wanted it to really look very natural overall, but I also wanted to move down the highlights to really give it that nice muted cool effect. So I'm going to move it down to about, say, minus 25 or so. So just to show you guys before and after, that was the before and that's the after. So you can just see it's taken off the brightness on this side of the image, and it's also taken the extra brightness off Pippa's face there. So it's kind of looking a little bit more even across the board. Some people kind of tend to call this a bit more of a flatter effect, which is not something that I use a lot with my beauty images, but I am enjoying experimenting with those kinds of effects in natural light images recently. I do tend to feel that they work quite well. Also, moving down to clarity, we are actually going to just bump this up a little bit because I find that I always want my natural light images to have a little bit more sharpness and a bit more clarity. I don't have the strobes there, so the images aren't always as in focus as much as I would like, or there might be parts that just need that little bit of extra sharpening. And now moving down to the curves, so we're actually just going to really tweak this very softly. So I want to just bring a little bit more contrast in first because we're about to mute the photo a little bit more. So every time we remove highlights or we move the highlights down, it does tend to give it that flatter effect. So I'm just kind of putting a little bit more contrast in before we do that. And then I'm going to move this point in here just to kind of like lift the mid-tones a bit. And then I'm going to bring down this top bar here, just down a little bit so it really gives that muted effect once again. And I'm just going to tweak this point here just to bring down the mid-tones a little bit. We don't want to make it too contrasted. Like I said, the reason we want to move down those highlights is to give it that muted effect. So I'm just going to do this really carefully and leave that at about there. So doing a quick before and after now, I can show you guys that I've sort of made a little bit more of an effect there with the muted kind of effect. And that's usually achieved by having a bit of an S-curve with the curves adjustment tab. So you can see there's a slight S-curve there in the way that it sort of shapes. Not really over the top though. Like I said, I want this to be very natural looking and I wanted this image to have a very natural effect. Okay, so now moving on to skin tone color correction. So I'm going to move over to the 3 circles here, the color tab. And then I'm going to go down to the skin tone tab, which you guys know I really do love in Capture One. I think this is such a great and powerful tool. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper tool and I'm going to drop it pretty much anywhere, maybe in Bella's skin tone, because Bella's skin tone's showing up a little bit more saturated. She was in a little bit more of shadow compared to Pippa. So it's really kind of showing through now with the effects that we've just applied. It's making it look quite saturated. So we're going to drop this in just around here in the mid-tones. We are going to adjust the hue a little bit. So I'm going to kind of move it a little bit more on the redder side, just a little bit, because I kind of want like some pinky tones to kind of show through in the image, just slightly to enhance that sunset kind of effect that we're going for with this image too, that natural sunset effect. And then also bringing down the saturation now and just kind of bringing that right down so it's not too overpowering. So you can see how much of a really, really big difference that will have made just by going to the before and the after. So you're kind of starting to see a bit more of a color grade, even coming through the skin tone color correction. This is going to change slightly as we adjust the color grade too. I'm not actually going to do too much to the color grade though, because I actually really liked that warm tone that the image was taken at that time of day in the natural light. So I really want to keep most of that intact, but I did want to really correct the skin tone because it was becoming quite saturated. And now going into the color balance tab, which is where we're just going to quickly tweak our color grade overall. So I'm actually just going to move the highlight just slightly over to this side. So I've just moved it over towards the cyan side of the color wheel, just slightly, and you can see that it's just kind of given that cooler effect on the skin tone on the highlights in particular. So we've still kind of got that underneath warm base of a skin tone there, but we're really taking away that oversaturation that we had before, which I do prefer with this particular image. It does look a little bit desaturated at the moment, but when I'm finished, you guys will see what I'm going to do to the other parts and how everything will look in the end. I'm also going to enhance the eyeshadows because they do tend to lose a bit of their saturation as well, along with the skin tone having similar tones that are within skin tones. So we're going to enhance them a little bit more by the end of the tutorial. So another quick before and after to show you guys before. So that is the before, and now this is the after for now. So we're going to head into Photoshop now, and I'm going to start enhancing certain parts of the image a little bit with color and also removing any distractions and just doing a skin retouch as well. So let's get straight into doing that. Okay, so now we've made it into Photoshop, so we're going to get started with the skin retouch and also improving some of the coloring in the image as well. So first off, I'm going to create my dodge and burn layers. You guys will probably know by now how I do this. I'm going to speed this section up so you guys won't have to sit through it for the 800th time on my channel. If you're interested in seeing how I dodge and burn, I have many tutorials on my channel, so I'll definitely link them down below in the description box. Okay, so now we've got our dodge and burn layers. I'm also going to create a blank layer just here for healing. I'm going to rename this healing as well. And we are going to start off by removing some little artifacts and just some little blemishes in the image and just little patches of skin that we don't want to appear as a distraction in the image. So I'm going to grab my healing brush tool over here, the spot healing brush tool. And then I'm going to start just moving it over some of the distracting elements just in the image here before we move on to dodge and burn. Going to also remove some of these hairs here so they don't become a distraction as well. I'm also actually going to create another layer now, and we're actually going to clone this particular part of the image out. Now for me, when I'm looking at this image overall, it does stand out to me and it does look a little bit distracting, seeing this piece of hair kind of like coming over here and also this part here. So I'm actually going to create another blank layer, rename this clone, and then we're going to get the clone stamp tool. And I'm going to keep it quite soft and making the brush a little bit bigger. And I'm actually just going to start selecting parts of the image by holding down Alt on the keyboard and then just filling those in. And at the same time, we're just going to remove just a couple of the little facial hairs and peach fuzz just on the model's cheek. I'm just turning off shape dynamics there under the brush settings. And this might take a couple of goes to kind of get this section how I want it. I tend to be quite messy with the clone tool actually at times. I'm just going to clone out some of the peach fuzz just here as well. I'm just going to show you guys what that actually has done in removing that. So you're not really looking too hard at this area now. It's just looking a little bit more clean. It's not looking so tangled there. I prefer personally how that looks. For some of you, you might not mind that being there as much, but personally, I just really wanted to get rid of it. I'm also going to actually just soften this area here at the moment because I also feel like it can be a little bit of a distraction further out. So I'm going to clone out this part, just to remove any of those little distractions. We're going to go onto our dodge layer now, and I'm going to start dodging and burning on the skin tone. Like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time showing you guys every little second of this because you guys have probably seen it before on my channel, and there's lots of different other videos where you can see more of a start to finish step-by-step process with that. I'm just going to make sure that you guys know what my settings are though. So I've got a small brush size, very low hardness at 0%. I've got 1% flow and 100% opacity and the white color selected over here. So this is how I usually do all of my dodging and burning. So now we're going to get straight into doing the dodging and burning, and I will speed this part up so you guys can see what I'm doing still, but you are not going to be sitting here for 3 hours watching me do this. So I just want to make a note here that what I am actually going to be doing with dodging and burning and skin retouch with this image is very minimal. I am not going to go too far with this. I'm not going to make it look super polished. I want it to have a little bit more of a raw look. So I want all that texture to kind of be intact as much as possible. And making sure that I'm switching between my dodge and burn tools. So I'm not just dodging a photograph, which can tend to lighten the skin tone at times, which is what we don't necessarily want. And just to make sure that other parts of the image are blended well. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick before and after for you guys just to show the progress so far. So this is the before and this is the after. So if you're looking quite closely, you can see that the skin tone hasn't changed too much, and that's really what I wanted for this image. I really wanted the freckles and the texture of the girl's skin to show through. So we're not going to do too much more to the skin on this, but what I will say is we will go over a couple of areas just with a paintbrush now. So what I'm going to do is create another layer on top of the Dodge and Burn, and we're going to call this paintbrush. I'm going to get the paintbrush tool, making it quite a large size, probably a bit bigger than that. So about this size, 0% hardness again, flow at 1, and then I'm going to start zooming in on this area for one. And then I'm going to start selecting with the eyedropper tool colors from this area of the skin tone and just painting over the skin. Now, some people would probably call this a shortcut method, which I believe it is a bit of a shortcut method to retouching skin. But I also feel like it gives, as long as you don't go too far with it, I think it gives a really nice effect on the skin tone in terms of helping it blend just a little bit more and getting any of that really rough or dry texture off of the skin a little bit more. So I'm just going to keep selecting areas that need to be selected. We're just going to remove some of those little bits of dry areas or overly textured areas that could appear distracting. And I'm just going to, using the darker color here, I'm going to start painting over this area. Like I said a little bit earlier, I wanted this to be a little bit softer, so this is what I'm going to be doing just in this area. Just kind of making it appear a little bit less of an element in the photograph. Okay, so you can see if I turn that on and off, you can see how much of a difference that makes with just blending a little bit more on the skin tone. I'm going to continue just using a slightly lighter color just over this area just to fill in a little bit of the patchiness there. It's not too much though. Okay, and then I'm going to continue just selecting other parts of the image. I just need a little bit less texture just in certain spots. Remember to do this very softly. We really don't want to go too overboard with these types of images because it will start to look quite apparent. Okay, now I'll show you guys before and after of that so you can see that that's just really helped to soften certain areas of the image. I'll show you guys a full before and after now. So this is the before and then this is the after. So another thing that we're going to do is actually just do a little bit of color correction and help the eyes stand out even a little bit more in this image. So how we're going to do that is I'm going to zoom in and we're actually going to start painting over the eyes. So I'm going to create another layer and call this eyeshadow. And then I'm going to get the paintbrush again. I'm going to make the flow a little bit heavier, say at around 4 to 6% or so. And then I'm going to search for a color up here in this tab, in the color tab, that sort of matches in with this pink color, even a little bit brighter so it will stand out a little bit more. And you want to make sure that it sort of really matches in. So I'm going to choose this color here. And then I'm going to start painting over the eyeshadow with a soft brush, making sure that it is quite soft. Just underneath a little bit. Just to bring it out a little bit more. We're actually going to change the blending mode to color. So I'll just turn on and off this eye so you can see what that's done. It's really enhanced the color of the eyeshadow, which is what we want. I want that to be a really big focus in this shot. And I'm going to do the same on the other side now. So I'm going to search for a color that's quite vibrant, similar to the eyeshadow, but will stand out even more on the skin tone. making sure it's on the warmer side. And then I'm going to start to paint over the yellow on this side. So just zooming out now, you guys can see how much of a difference this layer made alone in really bringing that out. If you feel like you've gone a little bit far, you can move the opacity down just a little bit, just to blend it a little bit more, which I might do probably about there. And that just really helps with popping out the eyeshadow colors. And then we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to rename this one Eyes. I'm actually creating a lot of layers today. I didn't realize how many layers I actually did with this particular image, but apparently there are a few. But the main thing is really not touching the skin too much, I think, with this image. It's still keeping everything looking fairly natural, but doing it in a more detailed way and a way that's not going to be over the top. So I'm going to choose now an eye color for the girls that's kind of a blue tone. And this is going to actually help them stand out a little bit more because we will change the blending mode. So same paintbrush settings, just very soft. And on both eyes. And then I usually set these kinds of layers to color dodge. Now, obviously that looks ridiculous, but what we're going to do is move the opacity right down on this. So just enough, just so it doesn't change the eye color itself too much, but it really helps with illuminating the eye. And it does give it a little bit more saturation this way instead of just dodging the eye, because sometimes that can look a little bit too strange. One last adjustment I'm going to make to this image is actually changing a little bit of the saturation just in Bella's skin tone here. So it's looking a little bit too overly red because of the shadows. So we're actually going to choose the lasso tool just over here. We're going to make sure that the feathering is quite large. So let's say about 50 pixels. We want it to be quite soft. And then I'm going to select this whole layer here, just where her skin is looking a little bit saturated. And even a little bit of the sclera there as well, just because her eyes were watering on the day. So they did end up being a little bit red at times. So we're going to just select that, go to the adjustment layers here and click on selective color. And we're going to move the magentas in the reds just down a little bit. So not too far, but just enough so you can see what a difference that has made just by switching on and off that layer there. And that really helps. If you feel like you haven't covered the area completely, you can actually use the mask to your advantage and just continue with having this part selected. And then you can choose your flow at 1% and start painting onto some areas that you might feel have a little bit much red in them, just to separate that a little bit more. And then I'm going to go to my dodge and burn layers, make sure we've got a few last minute tweaks in place. So I'm just going to darken the lashes a little bit just so the colors of the eyeshadow stands out a little bit more. So going to the burn layer, I'm just going to move my brush just over the lashes just to darken them and make the eyes stand out just a little bit more. And zooming out again, I'll go to the dodge layer and just seeing this area here just being a little bit patchy. So what I've just done there is just tidied up a few little areas with dodge and burn. I'm now going to show you guys the finish before and after. So this is the final image of what I did to this particular image. So you guys can see that I've really tried to keep the skin texture intact. I would also give it a high pass sharpen after finishing everything off. But I'm going to go back to capture one now and show you guys the before. So this is the before image. And then this is the after image. So I'll show you guys a proper before and after at the end side by side, but overall, this is basically what I did to the image, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure that you do, because I'll have lots more photography and Photoshop tutorials in future. Hopefully I'll have more photography ones in future. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle being in lockdown and not being able to produce a lot of behind the scenes and things like that, but I will do my best, and like I said, hopefully I'll have a little bit more on product photography too. So thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!